everybody. We're going to be talking, I'm going to move slower. I'm Greta, and Peter, and I have...
Hi.
And that's Meredith, and she'll join us in a moment. And we're here to talk about employment and automated systems. So, I'm going to just start with a very quick couple of questions for you all.
I think this group had not moved, and now they're moving. So we should, they should be coming in. So
Okay, we can just get started. You had some ideas for like specific questions, right? To ask people just to get a sense of are people starting to feel the effects of automation?
Yeah. I think it was more like, have you guys seen any of the decisions in your workplace being automated? Or, and what does that feel like to you? How does that affect you?
Oh, that's your
If you can't answer, but I think that was a broad question I was asking, but I was going to ask some more specific questions like, have you had to log online to get your schedule or to log in to get time off through technical system, through a computer?
So for you, if you guys can't hear, and we can also move in a little bit. And I was just asking a question to get started, which is, have you all experienced things like having to log into an automated system at work, or use a tablet, to put in your time, or have you had to download an app to interact with work systems? So any experiences y'all could share on any of those things?
Yeah, I don't think any of it's really automated, but we've switched to like app-based expense reports and PTO requests and timesheets and things. So that's one thing.
Where do you work?
I work at a structural engineering firm.
I'm an engineer, so kind of like an implementer, and so we're looking into implementing automated systems, right, for the other agencies that we support, and it's just kind of like awareness and understanding what biases are. I think that's one of the challenges that
Sorry, you're not. Okay, yeah, I think I've had to log into several different databases, everything from working in a restaurant to working all the way in law firms, where you have to give your everything from where you live, to your date of birth, all of that. Kind of also give up your rights to whatever you're doing on the computer, right? Like if you're looking up, say, directions from your home to wherever you're going, things like that. You never think about what you're logging into the computer. But yeah, I'm a law student. Christina.
Anyone wants to?
Anyone who wants to contribute?
That doesn't really apply to me because I have my own small business.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good way for us to get started, to think about how we've become so reliant on these systems and having to enter into a technical system in order to do our basic work. And in some instances, some of those systems are collecting information. Like every time you log in and log out of your system, every time you use a key card to go into a building and out of building, that information is being collected about you. And sometimes that data can be used to determine other aspects of your work. So someone mentioned a tablet in a restaurant. So if a customer is given that tablet, they can review the service. How did they like the food? How is the server? How is the atmosphere of the restaurant? That data then is collected and used to make a decision, could be used to make a decision about a server's schedule, their shifts, how many hours they get, where they get placed in a restaurant. This is kind of what we're talking about, how systems are automating decisions that used to be made by human and are using factors that may not necessarily be a clear relationship or even contain some biases in these systems. and I'm going to turn it over again to Meredith to kind of go more in depth about that, since she's done a lot of work on that.
Well, I'll start by saying that I've done some research on this and I've thought about it a lot. But one of the issues we encounter with these systems is that they are not easy to see. There are no transparency or disclosure requirements, and there's no requirement within businesses that employers notify. In almost all cases, there's no requirement that employers notify their workers that they're using such a system. So as researchers and as people who care about justice issues, it's often really difficult to determine what are these systems, where are they implemented, and are they producing discrimination, or are they being used for exploitation or oppressive uses? Because to determine that, you need a lot of information that only employers and the people who build these systems have, and have no interest to give us. So that's a sort of structural barrier. So what I can do is I can name a few of the points in the job process in which these types of systems are being deployed. But I want to be clear that a lot of the people who are working in these jobs and who are experiencing these systems will have a lot more knowledge than I do as a research person about these, because your lives will have interacted with these systems in ways it's hard to see from the outside. So we're seeing systems deployed in recruiting, and I think there's been some discussion of that already. Oftentimes these systems will do things like, it'll scrape LinkedIn, and it will look at how you wrote your resume, where you went to school, a lot of factors that have a lot, that can be very biased. Sometimes they will scrape your social media posts and look at the way you use language. One of these systems determined that the use of exclamation points was a sign of irresponsibility. And so when they're doing background checks, if someone uses a lot of exclamation points in their posts, say they're very excited, or they're feminized in some way, they would be considered less responsible and would have their sort of rating decline. There are many other systems that use many other proxies that don't make sense, but again, this is sort of taking the information they have and making fantastical claims about who you are and what you're capable of based on this system, embedding a lot of discriminatory logics, and ultimately calibrated in ways that will produce, that are intended to produce profit and revenue for employers, without often thinking about the well-being of candidates and workers. These are being used in hiring. Has anyone here used done a video interview? So that's
Really? Oh, no. No, she means like where you're not like a conference call. No, not like video chatting, but like where you're just one with the video, right? That's what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, although you could probably have a video chat that was instrumented with machine learning, but the ones I know, there are services that you kind of click, you're a job candidate, and as part of your screening, you click on a link and you answer a number of sort of written questions, just speaking to the video. So it's already very depersonalized, and you're kind of performing.
And they may give you like 30 seconds to respond. They'll say you have 30 seconds to think, and then 90 seconds to respond, and they analyze it.
So it's Target, Unilever, Goldman Sachs.
I've heard this for general counsel offices at major places.
So the way they use these systems, this one particular company, which is the one that advertises the most publicly, which is why we know about it. There's many others, but they don't have public advertising pages, so they're not easy to know, which is important, again, to emphasize. They create a template of what a successful worker looks like, sounds like, acts like, speaks like, what their facial movements look like. And they do that by taking representative videos of successful workers, people who've been promoted, who've been rewarded at a given company like Goldman Sachs. And then the aggregate of those videos becomes what they compare your video answers to. So if you look at Goldman Sachs, that's like everyone is named Chad, right? And then that is the basis on which they're making these determinations. There is no scientific evidence, zilch. Actually, the evidence that we do have repeatedly throughout history discredits the use of physical indicators of difference to determine interior states and capabilities. Even so, this is being sold, this is being used, this is shaping people's life chances and access to resources. It's then being used within within the job to monitor workers, to rate them. So do you get a promotion or not? To determine how much work they have to do. So at Amazon at warehouses, you've seen workers die from repeated injuries because they're trying to meet this performance target that's set by an algorithm that is meant to extract as much labor from them as possible without considering, are they sick? Did their hip go out? Can a human body actually do that much work? So in many of the communities where Amazon puts their warehouses, they're already economically depressed. And Amazon comes in and it's one of the better jobs pay-wise, but it's very rare for someone to be there beyond 6 months because the body can't stand it because the stress is so much. And that's all, you have a tracker on you at all times. It's tracking how much work you do. If you fall behind 3 times in one day, irrespective of how long you've been there, you will be fired. And so imagine being sick, imagine having a childcare emergency, imagine being pregnant and needing to go to the bathroom more often. All of these things are not considered by the algorithm. They're just it's calibrated to extract as much labor. That's not just happening in Amazon. That's a practice that is growing throughout other employers, especially employers that lease contract workers. So there's a longer conversation to have about the interrelationship between worker misclassification and the use of algorithms and automated forms of control. You have this in Uber and in other sectors, and you have automated scheduling. And I would like to turn it over just to talk specifically about the automated scheduling, and also open it up maybe for questions.
Yeah, just quickly, so the connection between misclassification and these automated systems is that if you're misclassified, you're not an employee, it's really hard to control what you can do. But if you can do it through a system and say, oh, I didn't tell that worker what to do. The system said deliver it in 5 minutes. Still, the system said you have to complete this in 2 seconds. I didn't tell them. I'm not managing them. It creates this control without actually showing that there is actual a business control in some way. So that's why it's like supporting these sort of temporary work and this classification of work. Really quick, and on the issue of scheduling, so the campaign for fair schedules existed long before there was a real acknowledgement that systems like Kronos were using the weather, customer traffic, whether they had a sale one day, whether the kids were off school, to make a determination about a worker schedule. It was always the conversation. It was like, what is a fair schedule? Is flexibility enough? And who gets to decide what flexibility is, right? So right now it's very much being decided by companies. They're saying, we need the most flexibility from workers. There's worker schedules, especially in retail, are scheduled down to 15 minutes. An employer can call someone in, can call a worker in and say, we need you here in 2 hours, and you'll get a 4-hour shift. Worker will take public transit, or if they have a car, it'll take them an hour to get to work, and then the employer can then say, you know what, never mind, we only need you for 2, and then you can leave. So they spent 2 hours traveling, only for 2 hours of pay. So there are multiple campaigns across the country: New York, LA, San Francisco. I think Philly is working on one to basically say workers need fair schedules, and this has got to be part of, because these systems can do this. That's the whole point of these technical systems. It can balance all these factors, but right now it's only considering the factors that employers want. So how can we get schedules ahead of time? They don't change. If they do change, you'll get extra pay because you just have to expend that extra time. And then how do you avoid things like clopenings, which is closing at 11 p.m. and having to open up at 5 a.m. in the morning? So these are some of the things that people are demanding. This is how people are pushing back and saying, it's a technical system, you're saying it's unbiased, you're saying it can do all of these things, so make it work for all of us. And then there are some legal challenges and efforts to remedy some of these as well.
Sure. So we've my law firm, Ouden & Golden, in conjunction with the ACLU Women's Rights Project and some other nonprofits and unions like the Communication Workers of America, have been trying to stamp out discrimination in job recruiting and advertising. So primarily on Facebook, but as well some other platforms. We have work underway. The idea is that micro-targeting tools that might be used, for example, to say we should send women's haircut products and shaving products to me, that those kinds of things that you can decide who sees what on social media based on gender or age or race or zip code, those shouldn't be used in the context of economic opportunities for things like jobs and housing and credit. And what our investigation revealed was that from everything from a local coffee shop to multinational corporations like Amazon and T-Mobile have been using, and big banks have been using age, gender, race, micro locations as well to determine who will see their job ads, their housing ads, their credit ads, financial services ads for credit cards, for insurance, investment consulting, everything that you want. You've been sliced and diced based on your demographics. And after several years of litigation, lots of cases, we got Facebook to agree to take, at least in the job, housing, and credit space, to remove demographics like age and gender and race and location. They actually, until, actually it's going to be done at the end of this month, but you could go on Facebook and create an ad where you, for example, you send it to everyone in New York City, but then excise and remove the zip codes that are in Harlem or the zip codes that are in Bushwick. And where based on the demographics of the zip code that you're excluding black people. And Facebook would actually draw a redlining around that zip code when you were excluding it. We pointed this out in our lawsuit in January of 2017, and they still kept it until even after we got them to settle and agree to make some reforms that they would implement over 6 months. So I do want to make a point, which I think is when you're thinking about the kind of garbage in, garbage out, it goes beyond that, right? Let's say you have data where there's a strong correlation between something, right? Like men are likely to be truck drivers, right? A company could take that and say, well, there's a historical imbalance because men have been encouraged to be truck drivers rather than women, and that's why we have this. And they could say, well, we're going to do affirmative outreach to women to try to address that imbalance. Or you could say, when we're recruiting, we think it's cheaper and easier to just focus our ad dollars on men, because the men are the ones who want the jobs. So and we actually found that to be the case. JK Moving, for example, was a moving company that only sent their job ads to men on Facebook and to younger men, right? And why do they do that? Because the marketing people saw that men and younger men clicked on these ads, not so at a higher rate. But if you take this assumption that there's a correlation and you essentially turn it into an absolute, a 0 or a 1, you're completely closing the door on people. I mean, and when it comes down to the law, you can't make decisions based on stereotypes. You can't say, men are likely to, want to go back to work and women want to take care of the baby, so women get a year of parental leave and men don't, right? You can't base things on stereotypes, but that is effectively what marketing is. And when we can disassociate the idea of kind of traditional marketing ideas from the economic opportunity space, we can ensure that there's a fair and free opportunity to find out about, to learn and pursue economic opportunity. And it's not just kind of active stuff, it's passive stuff. Like, does anyone have a LinkedIn account? LinkedIn, right? Have you used LinkedIn to try to find a job? Okay. Even if you haven't, you've been in a database where the recruiters at companies can search you by including things like where you went to college, the school, and the year that you graduated. Right, including where you are, within a 10-mile radius of where that place is, and things that are so fine that whether you end up in that search will matter whether you get recruited and asked to apply for a job. And think about that, right? You apply for lots of jobs not knowing what the terms are and what chance you have. Instead, someone's reaching out to you because you fell into their search of these very things that could have a very discriminatory impact. So
I just want to be cognizant of time because we're running out of it. And I wanted to mention you can find more about Peter's work at onlineagediscrimination.com and a couple other of the organizing resources that we've talked about. SEIU is doing work in this area. Gig Workers Rising, Drivers United, the AWOOD Center, was that?
AWOOD, A-W-O-O-D.
A-W-O-O-D.
But it's local SEIU, so it's not,
Okay.
you would...
So Staten Island, SEIU.
Staten Island, they're working with Gig Workers Rising is SEIU funded.
and Silicon Valley Rising, which works specifically with gig workers who work in the tech economy. Is that right?
Gig workers, they work on issues of displacement. So when tech moves into town and gentrifies everything, and they work with contract workers in tech, so the people who are like not treated well in tech work.
The separate bathroom at Amazon, for example, they have for.
So,
No,
and I just wanted to make sure if folks have questions, because we're about to wrap up, but those are some resources around worker organizing, and please, your question.
Is the EOC doing anything with regards to algorithms?
Yes, the EOC has found that it is unlawful under the anti-discrimination laws to target or exclude people based on age or gender in recruiting and advertising. They do have people looking at algorithmic bias. They've been requesting pay data with a new rule under the Obama administration to try to do analysis, but they've rolled it back under Trump.
I'm speaking of specifically AI.
AI.
bias. I'm aware
Yeah.
of the gender and civil and human rights practitioners.
Okay.
Yes, I do know that that's their mission, but I've not heard if they had a guidance or if they're doing anything with regards to AI bias.
They've done hearings on it. I mean, the folks who have focused on it are my colleague David Lopez, who's now the dean at Rutgers Law and works in my law firm. Jenny Yang, who is the chair, have really tried to move the ball forward. But part of the problem is there's no mandate for disclosure. They can't just go around subpoenaing every company because they're curious. Maybe the best place actually is the OFCCP, which is the Office of Federal Contract Compliance.
Are they doing any auditing?
They have, yeah. Pat Shue, who was the head of that. Pat Shue was the head of OFCCP under Obama. Like they've got a case against Oracle, where Oracle's gone nuts over gender discrimination. They're trying to take down the entire enforcement system actually through Gibson Dunn, the center of all evil.
A detail, I worked inside a tech company for a long time, and they were so afraid of this type of disclosure ultimately coming out that they would prevent researchers from doing the research on the AI bias because they wanted plausible deniability. So they know that it's there, and they would not allow people to do the experiments to find it because if they knew about it, they would then have a record that they needed to correct.
And they're hiring. One of the things to point out is the tech industry is essentially hiring their critics, including law firms that are civil rights firms. They've bought them off to be their compliance people and paid them lots of money for that, including people who work for prominent civil rights organizations. They've by researchers who write critical papers. They hire them to be Facebook's people, and because of the monopoly and the enormous amount of profit, tens of billions of dollars that they have in profit a year, they can do whatever they want to silence their critics. Notwithstanding that, there really are efforts in Congress. House and Senate Democrats are focusing on thinking about passing civil rights laws and other laws to regulate AI and machine learning and all sorts of use of data and technology. But I think one point to underscore is we have an opportunity right now because so much of this discrimination that humans were doing and have been doing has been secret, right? And it still is secret. In some ways, data and whistleblowing about data has allowed us to see a little bit more and pull back the curtain, right? Because we know there's been recruiting of men and white people and younger people for years. It's just now they actually stupidly disclosed it to us because Facebook tells us who's seeing what ad, right? But what we have to do is work to get more disclosure and sunlight on everything. There's no reason why if you're using some sort of low-tech use of data to discriminate that should be shielded, but not the high-tech stuff, right? And if we can get a law to advance the ball for tech, that could advance the ball on other things too, which will really expand opportunity.
So when you say disclosure, are you referring to the algorithm itself or the actual data that is being used?
So Facebook has a function that you can click on the upper right corner of the ad on your newsfeed where it will tell you, why am I seeing this ad? And it will give you very minimal amounts of information about how you fell into the advertiser's request. If you're 45, you might be told you got this ad because T-Mobile wants to reach people who are 18 to 40 to 50, and you fall in that, or men who are 18 to 50, so you fall in that category. There is a little bit more disclosure of political ads right now. On there's an ads library that discloses that, but as to the algorithm, there is no disclosure, and we're going to be subpoenaing their algorithm and taking discovery of it in some of our cases. But how the platform decides who sees what, which is different than what the advertiser directs of who will be eligible to see what. That's completely behind a black box and needs to be uncovered and shown, and that's just going to take litigation and government intervention.
Do you think it's imperative that employers should be required to be more transparent with their algorithms and identify what their input is and outcomes and that type of thing? And explainability?
Yes. I think that's a first step, not an end point, however, because seeing the algorithm is often not going to give you all the information you need about what is the social structure within which it's being implemented, what is the policy it's being used to implement. So there needs to be, the algorithm will tell you some things, the data will tell you something else, but you also need to know who collected the data, when was it collected, based on racist policing practices or something, what's the history there, and then how is it ultimately being applied? Because the algorithm may look clean, but then if it's being used to schedule people, you need the whole rich context. So we've written a bit about this, and there's the efforts for
I'm so sorry. The break is starting now. We're gonna take this place apart. Is there somebody that I can get to talk for 2 minutes about what they learned during this session, during the large group convening? So you gotta talk about what you learned, and I know you learned a lot. No one? Would you like to say? Thank you. That's all you have to do. Thank you so much for volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Greta, for taking notes
I took copious
directing
notes.
That's really small
directing
font.
the agenda.
I'm killing my eyes.
Why don't you make it bigger?